Um, Hello, Virgo. Um, Something is gathering, not loudly, not urgently, but with the kind of quiet, deliberate momentum that tends to precede the conversations that actually change things. And some of you, if you sit still enough to feel it, may already notice something in the air around a particular connection, a charged quality, a sense that words are forming somewhere just beyond the reach of the present moment, waiting for the right opening to finally find their way through. A theme appearing strongly here is the energy of a conversation that has been quietly building toward itself, not because someone forced it, not because circumstances demanded it, but because something between two people has reached a point where ordinary silence no longer quite contains it, where the unspoken thing has grown too present, too insistent, to be indefinitely deferred. And what's interesting about this particular kind of threshold is how recognizable it tends to feel from the inside. There's a texture to the interactions, a different quality of attention, a sense that something is being carefully navigated around, held gently at arm's length, while both people privately know it's only a matter of time before it steps into the center of the room. And yet the conversation hasn't happened yet, which means something is still holding it in suspension. Maybe it's timing the circumstances, not yet fully aligning. Maybe it's fear one or both people sensing the weight of what a real exchange might release and choosing, consciously or not, to remain just a little longer in the safer territory of almost. Maybe it's simply the natural rhythm of two people's inner lives moving toward the same point from different directions at slightly different speeds. Whatever the reason for the suspension, a pattern worth noticing here is that the suspension itself is rarely permanent. Things that are genuinely present between people tend to find a way through eventually. Not always cleanly, not always at the moment we choose, but through an energy that may be present for many of you right now is one of emotional readiness arriving ahead of conscious awareness, meaning some part of you has already been preparing for this conversation without telling the rest of you that's what it was doing. The way you've been processing certain things, the way particular memories have been surfacing unexpectedly, the way you've been quietly rehearsing in the background of ordinary moments what you might actually say if the space finally opened. That isn't anxiety, that is preparation. And preparation is a form of knowing that something real is approaching. A pattern that sometimes emerges at this stage in a connection is that both people are doing the same quiet work simultaneously without either one fully realizing the other is doing it too, both circling toward something, both feeling the pull of a conversation that hasn't started yet, but that is already, in some sense, underway. The silence between two people who are approaching an honest exchange has a completely different quality than the silence between two people who have nothing left to say. And some of you know, in the precise, instinctive way the body knows things before the mind catches up, exactly which kind of silence this is. This reflection invites you to consider what you would most want this person to understand about you, not the version of yourself you perform for safety, but the one that exists in the quieter, more unguarded moments, and whether you're willing to let that version be the one who shows up. Here's the thing about the conversations that actually matter: they almost never arrive with perfect timing or perfect conditions. They tend to find their way through ordinary moments, through an exchange that begins somewhere safe and then unexpectedly deepens, through a pause that stretches just long enough for something true to slip through a moment when both people happen to be present in the same honest space at the same time, and neither reaches for the exit. And an energy that may be present here is a quiet invitation to be available for exactly that kind of moment, to resist the reflex of deflection, to notice when the conversation is offering you something real, and to choose consciously, deliberately, not to redirect it towards something easier. Because deflection is such a practiced thing, so automatic for so many people, that it barely registers as a choice anymore. The pivot to humor when something vulnerable surfaces, the careful vagueness that keeps the conversation from landing anywhere too specific, the almost imperceptible shift in subject that moves both parties back to safer ground. And a pattern worth noticing here is that some of the most significant things that never got said between people weren't left unsaid because no one wanted to say them. They were left unsaid because one or both people were slightly too skilled at creating the exits before the moment could fully arrive. And those exits are so seductive because they feel kind in the moment. They feel like protection for yourself, for the other person, for a connection that you're not sure can hold the weight of complete honesty. But there is a cost to a life lived mostly in the anteroom of real exchange. There is a quiet accumulation of unlived moments, of connections that remained at a certain depth because no one was willing to go further. And some of you have been paying that cost for long enough that it has started to feel like the normal condition of things. Like closeness is always slightly out of reach. Like the real conversation is always one layer below the one that actually happens. This reflection is gently suggesting that it doesn't have to stay that way. Not with this person, not right now. This reflection is gently asking, what if this time you didn't? This reflection invites you to consider what you tend to deflect from in this particular connection, and whether that deflection has been protecting something that actually deserves protection, or simply keeping both of you at a distance that neither of you truly wants. An energy that may be present in this moment is also connected to clarity. Not the kind that arrives from the outside, not someone handing you an answer, not circumstances making the choice obvious, but the internal kind. The kind that surfaces when a person has done enough quiet work on their own truth that they are finally ready to bring it somewhere, to let it exist in the shared space between two people, rather than only in the private space of their own interior. And for some of you, that internal clarity has been forming for longer than you've given yourself credit for. The ground has been preparing, the understanding has been deepening, and a conversation that might have felt destabilizing even a short while ago may now feel less like a risk and more like a relief that is finally within reach. There's something almost luminous about that shift, the shift from dreading a necessary conversation to genuinely wanting it, from fearing what might be said to feeling ready to hear whatever is true. That shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens because something in you has become steady enough to hold the weight of an honest exchange without collapsing under it. And an energy appearing here is a quiet acknowledgement of exactly that steadiness in you, whether you've been naming it that or not. A theme worth sitting with is the idea that a real conversation, one where both people are genuinely present and genuinely honest, is one of the rarest and most valuable things that can happen between two people. It doesn't require grand declarations. It doesn't require perfect words or perfectly managed emotions. It requires only a shared willingness to stop managing the distance and allow the truth of the connection to be seen. Just that. Just the simple, courageous act of being seen by someone who matters and seeing them in return. This reflection invites you to consider what becomes possible in this connection if both of you stop trying to manage what the other person is allowed to know about how you actually feel and what the first small step toward that kind of honesty might look like for you specifically. And this is where it gets both subtle and exciting, because a pattern that sometimes emerges in the lead up to a significant exchange is a period of what might be called convergence, where the separate threads of two people's inner lives begin to move toward the same point without any explicit coordination, where both begin to feel independently that something needs to be addressed, that the current equilibrium, however comfortable it may appear on the surface, is not the truest version of what's available between them. And when both people arrive at that feeling around the same time, the conditions for a genuinely transformative conversation begin to align in a way that is remarkably different from a conversation held before either person was ready. The readiness matters. The timing, even when it can't be controlled, tends to have its own intelligence. And an energy present here suggests that the intelligence of this particular timing may be working in your favor in ways that aren't yet fully visible, but that you might begin to trust a little more than you have been. There is also something worth noticing about what readiness actually feels like from the inside. It doesn't always feel like confidence. It doesn't always feel like certainty or calm or having all the answers prepared. Sometimes readiness feels like a kind of quiet resolve, a sense of whatever this is, I am willing to find out. Whatever this exchange holds, I am more interested in the truth of it than I am in the comfort of continued suspension. That willingness, that fundamental openness to what is actually real between two people is one of the most powerful things a person can bring to a significant conversation. And an energy appearing here suggests that many of you are already carrying it, even if you haven't named it that yet. A theme appearing here is also the idea of courage as an act of generosity, because stepping into an honest conversation with someone being willing to say the true thing, to ask the real question, to let your actual self be present in the exchange isn't only something you do for yourself, it's something you offer to the other person. You give them the gift of your realness. You give them the opportunity to meet you where you actually are, rather than where it's convenient to pretend you are. And some of the most profound moments of connection between people happen precisely in that space when one person's courage creates enough safety for the others to follow. This reflection invites you to consider whether you might be the one in this connection who goes first, who creates that safety, who opens that space, and what it would feel like to step into that role, not from desperation, but from genuine, grounded confidence in the value of what you're offering. There is something worth naming about the emotional texture of what may be approaching. Because a conversation of this kind, one that has been building, one that both people have been quietly orienting toward, tends to arrive carrying more than just its surface content. It tends to carry everything that preceded it, the history, the things that almost got said, the moments of connection that were felt but not acknowledged, the distance that accumulated not because either person stopped caring, but because neither one knew how to close it. And when that conversation finally happens, when the words that have been waiting find their way through, there can be an almost overwhelming quality to the relief of it. The sensation of something that has been suspended finally being allowed to land. That kind of relief is worth moving toward. Not because the conversation will be easy, or because its outcome is predetermined, or because honesty guarantees a particular result, but because living in the suspended state, hovering permanently on the edge of something real without ever quite entering it, has its own quiet cost. And an energy appearing here is the sense that you are approaching the moment where that cost is no longer necessary to pay. The closing energy of this reflection is one of warm, steady, forward leaning anticipation, not the anxious kind, not the bracing kind, the kind that belongs to someone who has done their interior work, who knows what they feel and why, and who is moving toward an honest moment with an open enough heart to let it be whatever it actually is. There is real beauty in that posture, real strength in the willingness to engage with the truth of a connection rather than perpetually managing the appearance of it. Whatever this conversation holds, whatever it opens, whatever it clarifies, whatever it makes possible that wasn't possible before, you are more prepared for it than you may realize. And not because you have the perfect words ready, but because you have quietly and over time become someone who can hold the weight of a real exchange and remain standing. Someone who can be present in the fullness of a significant moment without needing to control every detail of how it unfolds. This reflection invites you to consider what kind of person you want to be on the other side of this conversation. Not in terms of outcome, but in terms of how you showed up, how honestly you spoke, and how fully you allowed yourself to be present for something that genuinely mattered. Because here is what often gets lost in the anticipation of a significant exchange. The outcome, whatever it turns out to be, is only one part of what the conversation offers. The other part, perhaps the more lasting part, is what it does to the relationship you have with yourself. Whether you left the exchange knowing you were honest, whether you held your ground when it mattered, whether you listened as fully as you spoke, whether you gave this connection the quality of presence it deserved, rather than performing a managed version of yourself that kept the real stakes safely at a distance. That inner accounting, the one only you will ever fully hold, tends to matter more over time than any single outcome. That is the preparation that actually matters. That is the readiness that no amount of rehearsed lines can replace. Trust what you know, trust what you feel. And when the conversation arrives, however it arrives, in whatever ordinary or unexpected moment it finally finds its opening, let yourself be fully, honestly, gloriously present for it. You have already done more of the work than you realize, and that work is about to find somewhere real to land.